Hello, public health students. My name is Doug Powell. I used to be a professor at Kansas State University, but they fired me for bad attendance because I live in Brisbane, Australia. Today, what I'm going to do is take you through a trip through the supermarket that you may do as a public health inspector. And I'm using the phrase jump the shark. If you remember that show, Happy Days, the phrase jump the shark means when a TV show gets desperate and they bring in weird characters, and in this case it was Fonzie jumped over a shark. So in my mind, this whole notion of food safety culture has jumped the shark, and we need to get back to basics and focus on food safety. So I'm going to quickly go through a whole bunch of stuff. I've provided a bunch of papers, background material, and everything I tell you is on barfblog.com. And I will always talk to students, so you can email me anytime with any inquiry. I need my glasses so I can see, but it probably looks weird. All right, but first I'm going to talk about hockey. Now this is me 14 years ago. I had a lot more hair. But we're actually going to circle around to this. I have 4 daughters in Canada. One of them is the goalie. One of them is that one, 2 over from me. That guy on the far right, he's a professor at North Carolina State now. He did his PhD with me. And I'm going to come back to how hockey's a metaphor for a lot of what you do in food safety. Now there's that same kid. She's 21 years old now. But that was her when she was 7. We won all Ontario. I was the coach. And she came to Brisbane last year because I'm in Australia. And Kansas has no ice hockey. But Brisbane has 2 arenas. And I have a 5-year-old daughter with my second wife. And that's my 21-year-old daughter, that same kid, grown up, with my 5-year-old. And in Brisbane, at the arenas, it's figure skating that rules and public skating. Hockey is an afterthought. Girls hockey is even more of an afterthought. So the teachers told my kid when she first went out to skate that she had to wear these figure skates, and she had hockey skates. And she was traumatized by that and wouldn't wear them. So my kid shows up, Bronwyn, the 21-year-old, and she came up with this soundbite on her own, which was, princesses wear hockey skates. And they dressed up in tutus and they wore hockey skates. Oh, and by the way, they went out and they do this, sort of skate off. And my 21-year-old kicked all the boys' asses, and they'd never seen anything like it before, and they didn't know what to do. Anyway, I'm coaching hockey in Brisbane now. There's my kid, there's my team. And it's all good. But that soundbite, princesses wear hockey skates, encapsulates everything you need to know about food safety information. It must be rapid. It must be reliable. It must be relevant. And it must be repeated. And my kid hasn't seen me lecture, but she encapsulated all of that in that one soundbite. So that was pretty good. And there's my 5-year-old playing hockey. Now, when we talk about food safety, this is what you see. This is a market in Brisbane. You see everything on here except safety. I mean, everything. But nothing about microbial food safety, which is what I care about, because that's what makes people sick. One of my students, and you have the background paper, developed a food safety restaurant inspection disclosure system for New Zealand. And on the side, they came up with this. And I thought this was a little more accurate than the nonsense on that previous poster. All right, so let's walk through the grocery store. And this is actually, there's 2 main grocery stores in Australia, Coles and Woolworths. It'd be no different than, say, a Walmart and a Dillon's for Kansas, okay? So, first thing, should that lettuce be washed? If it's pre-packaged and says it's washed, the science says don't wash it. What about the stuff that's out loose in the bins at retailers? Are consumers supposed to wash it? No, because it's already been washed, and the scientific consensus is that you are going to contaminate it more with all the crap that's in your kitchen. But what's a consumer to think? Are there labels? Is there any instructions? Not really. What about your produce, like strawberries? This is an outbreak from 2012, I believe. One person died, 14 sick, from strawberries. And Bill Keene, who was the state epidemiologist for Oregon, and he died last year, unfortunately, was smart enough to go and check out the strawberry field, and he picked up deer droppings. And they had the same E. coli 0157 strain that was found in the sick people. And that's because deer are ruminants, like cattle, sheep, goats, elk, and so on. They are natural reservoirs of E. coli 0157 and other Shiga toxin-producing E. coli. He was able to show that it was Bambi going through the strawberry patch, having a dump, and that led to people getting sick. Washing is not going to do anything. It removes maybe 2 log of bacteria. For produce, food safety has to start on the farm, and prevention is the big issue. You can't kill all the birds, but you can limit access, and that's really key because it will not wash off. Melons. Let me get a melon. All right, so here we have a honeydew melon. That's a very hard skin. There's been no outbreaks linked to honeydew melons. Cantaloupe, or as they call it in Australia, rock melon, there's been a lot of outbreaks, and that's because the skin is very porous. And if you look in the fields in Kansas, you can see when it rains a lot, all that cow poop from up in Nebraska and stuff is washing down, and the cantaloupes are just sitting in the water. And the water will go into the cantaloupe because the skin is so porous, and it will actually take microorganisms in. So telling people to wash their stuff is really of little use. It has to be prevented on the farm. Another big thing is if you go to the supermarket, you'll find these things cut in half because retailers want to sell it. As soon as you cut it, you're creating an ideal microbial growth environment. Never buy a cut watermelon or a honeydew melon, or especially a cantaloupe. That is a recipe for disaster, and it's been shown over and over again. Sprouts. I don't eat sprouts. There's not much food I won't eat, but I will not eat raw sprouts because they are microbial growth factories. The big outbreak, this is my wife and Guelph in 2006. In 2011, 53 people were killed. 4,400 got sick with E. coli 0104, another Shiga toxin producing E. coli. And sprouts are one of these stealth ingredients. You know, even when I was at Kansas State, they would get sandwiches from Jimmy John's. And Jimmy John's just has a huge history of outbreaks related to sprouts. There's one going on right now. You can see from the slide the details, and all the slides will be available for you. It's what we call a stealth ingredient. It's added to sandwiches. And I would actually go to faculty meetings, and they would sometimes order in Jimmy John's sandwiches, and I would say, this has sprouts on it. You shouldn't do this. You're supposed to be the food safety school. And they would look at me like I had fell off the turnip truck, like, what? But if we can't practice food safety as professionals, how do you expect mere mortals to practice food safety? There's an outbreak going on right now in Idaho, there's at least 10 people sick with E. coli 0121 because Jimmy John's went to these clover sprouts, and again, the late great Bill Keene predicted this would happen. We'll see outbreaks with that, and now it's happening. Sprouts are just bad news, and even if they're not on your sandwich, there's cross-contamination because the kid making the sandwich was probably handling them for the customer before you. So we need to create this culture of food safety, but I'm afraid that that's sort of been lost, and we need to go back to basics. And the basics are don't eat poop, and if you do, cook it. Here's some more notes about the sprouts thing. It just goes on and on. Every outbreak that is investigated, you go in afterwards and you do a post-mortem and you say, how did this not happen earlier? Or why didn't anyone notice? And I've been doing this for 20 years now, and it's repetitive. But still, every week I read about some distraught parent who says, I didn't know, and my kid is sick and they need a new kidney. So that's why I keep at it. Maple Leaf Foods in Canada in 2008. This is a company doing $5.5 billion a year in sales. And their cold cuts killed 23 people and sickened 57. And it's because of the slicers. They did really good risk communication, but they did terrible risk management. In fact, a review by the government found that food safety was insufficient. They didn't care. I mean, food safety, everyone talks a good game when there's an outbreak, but in the absence of an outbreak, it's all about quarterly profits. And food safety is whatever. It's way down the list. There was no sense of urgency, and even this independent government inspector found that there was needed to be actions, not words. The thing with listeria is it grows in the refrigerator. Now, I don't know if you buy deli meat. If I buy deli meat, I buy the packaged stuff. If you go to the slicer, those things are reservoirs for listeria and other bacteria because they're very difficult to clean. And this is what happened with Maple Leaf. They have these huge industrial sized slicers that never really got cleaned. So if you're this company and you say, oh, I'm sorry, whatever, what could you do different? Well, you could put warning labels because people are at certain high risk for listeria, especially pregnant mothers. Listeria produces a toxin that will cross the placenta and causes stillbirths, and this happens far more than it should. So there should be warnings for pregnant moms. Also, the stuff you buy at the counter, it has a shelf life of 2 to 4 days. And you go to the supermarket and you watch people, and they go and they buy 2 pounds of sliced turkey or sliced roast beef, and you ask them, well, what are you going to do with that? Oh, I'm going to make sandwiches for the next 2 weeks. Yeah, but the shelf life's 2 to 4 days. And in fact, Publix, which is a supermarket in Florida in the southern US, they've actually gone out and on their bags, when they slice the deli meat, it says, look, we try hard on food safety, but we recommend that all cold cuts are best used within 3 days of purchase. They're the only retailer I've seen do this, and I commend them for it. It can be done. In 2012, there was an outbreak of E. coli 0157 linked to this plant in Alberta, XL beef. 17 people got sick. Again, there's this whole laundry list of things that were wrong. And they had 40 inspectors, 6 veterinarians. No one paid attention. In fact, they actually said that, oh, they had a culture of friendliness. So, audits, inspections, they're not going to guarantee food safety. It has to come from the top of the company. The thing with the XL beef is that people may know to cook hamburger to 160 because the outside becomes the inside. But with steak, you can just sear it on the outside and the inside's okay because it's sterile or something. Except a lot of meat is needle tenderized or mechanically tenderized. That is, a bunch of little needles inject marinade. But what that does is essentially turn it into hamburger. It takes the outside to the inside. And that's what they found in this XL outbreak, is that some of the people got sick were eating this meat. They undercooked it because they thought it was steak. So Canada's going ahead with some sort of labeling, but I mean, labeling's not a guarantee of anything anyway. And they're saying cook to 145. People don't want steak that much. What they found is that if you turn it a lot, it tends to reduce the risk. In the UK, there's been all kinds of outbreaks, and tragically in 2005, a 5-year-old kid died in the school lunch program, and about 400 kids got sick from E. coli 0157. And the butcher who was supplying the roast beef to the school was using the same machine to package raw and cooked product. The same thing had happened in 1996 in Scotland, and 23 people died. And then last year, this guy comes out, Mr. Celebrity Chef, and says, we weren't aware the regulations have changed. These people do not know food safety. And it's up to us to make sure they do. These are chicken breast nuggets from Coles that my kid likes to eat. The thing with these things, there's been a number of outbreaks related to frozen chicken thingies like nuggets or cordon bleu or whatever. And the US has actually required a change in labeling to make it very prominent to say whether it's raw frozen chicken nuggets or cooked frozen chicken nuggets. If it's cooked, you can just reheat it. If it's raw, it has to go to 165 and you have to verify it with a thermometer. Now in Australia, because I was familiar with this from the US, I went and this is what my kid was eating, and then, my wife cooked these for Soren one day, and she said, oh my God, I think I made her sick because I didn't check it with a thermometer. And I called them, and it turns out, yeah, we just flash fry them to make sure the batter sticks. They're not cooked, and there's no warning label at all. These have to be cooked to 165. And if retailers can't get it straight, how are consumers supposed to get it straight? And you as public health professionals need to call people on this stuff. Salmonella pot pies. It's the same idea. They had no verification. They initially said, 400 people got sick. They initially said, oh, well, if you just follow the instructions, you'll be fine, except I followed the instructions and posted it on Barf Blog, and the New York Times picked it up and found that microwaves are great for reheating stuff, but they're terrible for cooking because there is so much temperature variation. What I found was that the pot pies are only going to 120 and they had raw product in there. So a bunch of people got sick. Thermometers are key. Now in the UK, they say cook your food till it's piping hot. They're spending millions of dollars on communication salaries for the Food Standards Agency, authority, whatever it is. And the best advice they can come up with is cook it until it's piping hot. No. Use a thermometer. That's your data. stick it in. We have an ongoing project with hamburger. Color is a lousy indicator. Research done by Melvin Hunt at Kansas State about a decade ago showed that something like 30% of hamburgers will be pink, yet have reached a sufficient temperature for safety, and that some hamburgers will be brown and not have reached a sufficient temperature for safety. And that has to do with red blood cell types in the meat when it's harvested. The idea of using fingers is frightening, and I don't go to anyone's house for dinner except with my thermometer, and I usually give one to whoever I'm having dinner with. I don't get invited for dinner a lot. I'm not really that much fun. There have been tens of thousands of people sickened across Europe and the US in the past year from frozen berries. Well, it turns out that these berries, you get them in the frozen pack. Dropped a banana, something like that. Berries, melons. They're sourced from all over the world, and you really have to read the instructions carefully to know exactly where they're from. Now, it turns out most of the contaminated berries are coming from Egypt, and I don't always cook my berries. I sometimes just let them thaw and I put them on cereal. That's how I like them. But there's this huge hepatitis A outbreak. Again, at the grocery store, could they provide better information? When we talk about food safety, my definition is food that doesn't make you barf or make your pets barf. And there's another outbreak of salmonella in pet treats going on right now. It's that simple. So how do we prevent it? Well, currently food safety is a mishmash of mandatory inspection for the meat sector and third-party audits. And in our research, and I've given you the paper, we found that both of those approaches are really lacking. Instead, if a company's going to sell food, they're responsible for the safety of it. And they should not rely just on paperwork from some other company that's supplying them. They need to go out and assess it for themselves. Now, I'm not naive enough to know, the food industry is huge. There's all these ingredients moving all around the world. There's always going to be audits and inspections. But do you really want the brand of, say, Walmart or Costco? Do you want to put your brand at the whim of some paper checker? I don't think so. We need auditors who know more about risk. We need people doing their own audits. We need a whole bunch of new technologies that people can use to combat indifference, really, because in food, whether it's food service or on the farm or at the supermarket, it's minimum wage, it's high turnover. People are worried more about who they're going out on a date with that night. Do you really want that person to be your critical control point to control whether your brand survives or not? And that's the argument I make. Anyone who says we meet government standards is off the trail. That government standards are minimal. The best companies go above and beyond. After doing this for so long, I've concluded that the only way consumers can really have a voice and make change is to market food safety at retail. As I showed you in that earlier slide, You can get all sorts of food, natural, sustainable, local, organic, whatever, dolphin free. Nothing about microbial safety. Yet I want to reward those companies that practice good food safety with my dollar. So I want to know that they source food from safe sources and that they have their own auditors checking it. I want public disclosure of food safety inspection results. I want every company, and some companies are starting to do this. They're posting on websites. This is our E. coli testing results. Most people don't care. Most people just want to go shopping. But for those who care, that's an important thing. Anyone who handles food should have some sort of basic certification. This isn't even talking about making the training better. This is just basic. I said I coached hockey. To do that in Canada for a rep team, I needed 40 hours of training. When I came to Australia, I had to retrain and get for 16 hours just to coach little kids. Yet you can make a meal and you don't need anything. Information needs to be rapid, relevant, reliable, and repeated. And this is not about education, because most people don't want to be educated, but they do want stories. They care. People get sick, they die. These are compelling stories. Tell the story. And for all those food safety surveys out there about people think this or that, that's all nonsense. Food safety leaders do more than follow perceptions. You create the perceptions. Lead, don't follow. And the reason we do this is for our families, and that's that grad student there, again, with his 2 boys and his wife, and me and my daughter and my wife in Florida. We do this because we all feed our families and we care. And so should you. Everything I said can be found at barfblog.com. Hopefully the technology will work, and I look forward to a chat. Thank you very much.